Could you please help this new channel by liking and subscribing? As you see, most of you listening are not subscribing. It will really help the channel grow. Thank you so much.
I was in desperate need of a quiet weekend away from my hectic corporate job in the city. I had been working long, stressful hours and just wanted a peaceful place to relax and recharge. After browsing Airbnb listings for hours, I came across a cozy one-bedroom log cabin tucked away in the countryside that looked perfect. It had beautiful wood floors, a stone fireplace, and a full kitchen with granite countertops. The photos showed it was surrounded by lush green trees, right next to a crystal-clear lake. I could already imagine myself sitting fireside with a good book and waking up to the sounds of nature. This seemed like exactly the serene escape I needed, so I immediately booked it for 2 nights. The drive to get to the remote cabin took me about 2.5 hours from where I lived downtown. As I left the busy highways and skyscrapers behind, I noticed the landscape become much more rural. I started passing more farms, fields, and dense forests instead of businesses and congested roads. By the time I arrived at the gravel driveway leading to the cabin, there wasn't a building in sight. The area felt charmingly secluded. I parked next to the quaint log cabin, which sat nestled among towering oak trees right along the shore of the dazzling blue lake. A slender wooden canoe was tied to a post at the water's edge, awaiting my use. I unlocked the heavy wooden front door and stepped inside the cozy interior. It was even better than I had imagined. The living room had overstuffed antique armchairs, a couch laden with hand-knit blankets, and that gorgeous Riverstone fireplace already stocked with log. The kitchen was straight out of a magazine with granite countertops, shiny stainless steel appliances, and a vase of freshly picked wildflowers on the farmhouse table. In the bedroom, a wrought iron bed frame held the plushest pillow-top mattress I'd ever seen, covered in a fluffy white down comforter. I excitedly claimed this luxurious bed as mine for the weekend. After thoroughly exploring every nook and cranny of the perfectly decorated cabin, I knew I had chosen the ideal location for a peaceful reset. Eager to enjoy the great outdoors, I decided to take advantage of the hiking trails surrounding the cabin right away. I changed into broken-in boots, packed a small backpack with bottles of water and trail mix, and ventured out the back door. A narrow dirt path, clearly marked with wooden signs, began right behind the cabin and disappeared into the dense forest. I hiked for what felt like miles, breathing the fresh air and taking in the remarkable views of colorful wildflowers and towering pines. Eventually I came to a sunny meadow where I paused to sit in the soft grass and enjoy a snack, soaking up the tranquility. After resting for a while, I began the scenic walk back to the cabin, ready to relax by the fire. As I got closer to the cabin after my long hike, I noticed the back door was slightly ajar. That was peculiar since I clearly remembered closing and locking it before leaving. I slowly pushed the door all the way open and hesitantly called out, "Hello?" No answer. My heart began racing as I did a full sweep of the cabin, checking every room and closet to make sure no one was inside. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place or disturbed. Just as I was about to chalk it up to my own forgetfulness, I entered the kitchen and immediately froze. There on the granite counter sat a large hunting knife, coated in what looked unmistakably like dried blood. I stood staring in disbelief and fear. The metallic stench of the blood permeated the room. I was afraid to touch the weapon, unsure if this was animal or human blood. I debated calling the police, but what if it really was just animal blood and I got the poor owner in trouble? I opted to try contacting the host first to get some answers. I went outside, away from the unsettling knife, and called the owner's number listed in my booking confirmation. She sounded completely mystified and shocked. She assured me no hunting was allowed anywhere on the property, and swore she had no clue where the knife could have possibly come from. She pleaded with me to leave quickly while she called the police just to be safe. With my heart still racing, I hurriedly gathered my belongings, loaded up my car, and drove to the nearest town. I anxiously waited in a cozy diner, picking at a slice of pie while the police searched the cabin. Finally, the apologetic owner called back, insisting the cabin was now empty. No knife, no intruders, nothing unusual whatsoever. She had no explanation for the bloodied knife I saw, and promised me a full refund for the traumatic experience. Though immensely relieved there was apparently no immediate threat, I was still deeply unsettled by what I had witnessed. I decided to drive all through the night to get home, wanting to put as much distance between me and the cabin as possible. I've replayed those chilling moments over and over, still perplexed about where that eerie knife could have possibly come from. One thing's for certain, though. I'll be sticking to nice, safe chain hotels from now on. I was thrilled when I booked the weekend getaway at the charming little bungalow I found on Airbnb. It looked so cozy and peaceful in the photos online, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood right by the beach. A perfect escape from my stressful job and hectic city life. I smiled eagerly as I loaded up my car on Friday morning, ready for 2 days of reading on the porch, walks on the beach, and maybe trying that cute little cafe downtown. I made excellent time on the drive over thanks to light traffic, and was pleased to see the surrounding beach town was just as quaint as advertised. When I pulled up to the bungalow, I was relieved to see it looked exactly like the pictures. A single-story craftsman-style cottage with a big front porch and colorful flowers lining the walkway. The owner, an elderly woman named Betty, gave me a quick tour of the place and seemed friendly enough, if a bit eccentric. She had decorated every inch with doilies and cheery vintage art. As we sipped iced tea at the kitchen table, finalizing my stay, her 2 tabby cats kept rubbing against my legs. Betty apologized, saying the cats always get excited to meet guests. We parted ways, and I did a more thorough walkthrough on my own. The layout was simple: a cozy living room and kitchen downstairs, bedroom and bath upstairs. Everything I needed for a restorative weekend. That first evening I settled into the plush couch with a mystery novel and a cup of chamomile tea. I could hear the distant crashing of waves as I read. It all felt so calm and peaceful. I ended up falling asleep pretty early, still tired from getting up pre-dawn to drive here. Sometime in the middle of the night, I was startled awake by a loud banging from upstairs. It sounded like it was coming from the attic directly above the bedroom. My heart started racing as I lay there disoriented in the dark, listening intently. Thump, thump, thump. There was clearly someone or something banging around right above me. I was paralyzed in bed, gripped by fear and unsure what to do. I desperately wanted to get up to investigate the noise, but I couldn't seem to make myself move, imagining some intruder lurking upstairs. The banging continued erratically for several minutes as I lay frozen, listening hard for any other sounds, creaking floorboards, voices. But all I could hear was the banging. I squeezed my eyes shut and pulled the covers up, willing it to stop. And then after what felt like an eternity, it did. The house fell silent again. My pounding heart began to slow. Some bad dream, fueled by reading a mystery novel before bed. Exhaustion overtook me again, and I somehow fell back asleep. When I awoke mid-morning, the events of the night seemed hazy and distant. Sun streamed in through the sheer curtains, and everything looked normal in the light of day. I dressed and went to make some coffee, trying to convince myself it was nothing, just the noises of an old house settling. But an uneasy feeling still lingered. I carried my coffee out to the front porch, hoping the sea air would clear my head. I tried to focus on my book, but found myself straining for any odd sounds. Around noon, it started up again, distant at first, a sort of muffled pounding, but it quickly grew louder and more insistent. My sense of unease spiked back into dread. I knew I had to inspect that attic right away. I located a flashlight in the kitchen junk drawer and pulled down the rickety ladder leading up to the attic. With trembling hands, I climbed into the musty, cramped space, sweeping my flashlight around. Nothing, just dust and boxes. No sign of where the banging could be coming from. Mystified, I climbed back down the ladder, but the banging continued sporadically, the source still unexplained. I spent the rest of the afternoon wandering the house perplexed, even going outside to listen from different angles. But I found no loose shutters or tree branches that could be causing it. By early evening, I had reached my limit. I did not feel safe spending another night here. I decided to pack up and head home first thing in the morning. I broke the news to Betty over the phone, and she seemed genuinely shocked and apologetic. She insisted in her 2 years renting the bungalow she'd never had a single complaint. but my mind was made up. I just needed to make it through one more night. The banging persisted as evening fell. I blasted music and TV trying to drown it out, but the noises gnawed at me, putting me even more on edge. I tossed and turned all night, barely sleeping. By first light, I had loaded up the car, ready to put this place behind me. I felt overwhelming relief as I got on the highway, the strange banging finally fading into the distance. I still have no idea what caused those noises. Something malfunctioning in the attic? Or something more sinister? I didn't care to find out. I was just happy to leave that unnerving house and banging noises far behind. The experience had left me rattled and eager to get home, chalking it up to one of those unexplainable and best forgotten travel oddities. I should have trusted my instincts when I booked that cheap Airbnb listing. But I was in a bind. Every hotel was fully booked for the conference I was attending, and this seemed like my only option for an affordable place to stay. Against my better judgment, I went ahead and booked it. When I pulled up to the address, I immediately felt uneasy. The house was run down with peeling paint, overgrown shrubs, and a sagging front porch. I double-checked the address, even though I knew this was the right place. With growing trepidation, I forced myself up the creaking steps and knocked firmly on the weathered front door. A tall, slender man answered. This must be Martin, my host. He looked to be in his 50s, with disheveled gray hair, overgrown stubble, and darting eyes that avoided direct contact with mine. His clothes were wrinkled and stained. "Ah, you must be my guest," he exclaimed with an unnaturally wide smile. "Come in." As I hesitantly stepped inside, I was hit with an overwhelming musty smell. The front room was dimly lit and crammed full of old furniture covered in layers of dust. Martin led me on a quick tour, pointing out the kitchen, living room, and bathroom, all just as unkempt and stale-smelling as the front room. When we reached the top of the narrow staircase, Martin showed me to my room at the end of the hall. It held just a sagging twin bed, a rickety nightstand, and a dilapidated dresser. The dingy floral print curtains were half drawn over the room's sole window. Martin lingered in the doorway as I set my suitcase down, his gaze drifting over me in a way that made me profoundly uncomfortable. After an awkward moment, he seemed to catch himself staring and quickly explained where the bathroom was located across the hall. "Let me know if you need anything," he said with a strange enthusiasm before slipping away. I shut the door behind him and sighed, already dreading spending the next 3 nights here. I did what I could to settle into the musty little room, but I couldn't shake the ominous feeling that lingered like the smell of mold in the air. I kept glancing warily at the flimsy door, half expecting Martin to burst back in at any moment. When evening came, I decided to escape the confines of the house for a while, in search of dinner. As I hurried toward the front door, I noticed Martin's tall frame lurking just around a corner, peering at me before quickly disappearing from view. A chill went down my spine. Throughout my meal at a nearby cafe, I debated just getting a hotel. But my budget was tight, so with great reluctance, I returned to the house as darkness fell. Back in my room, I changed into pajamas and checked that the door was locked before settling into bed. I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard the distinct creak of a floorboard right outside my room. I bolted upright, pulse racing. Someone was in the hallway. Holding my breath, I tiptoed over and pressed my ear to the door. Over the thudding of my heart, I could make out heavy wheezing breaths. My blood turned to ice. This was no creaky floorboard. Someone was standing right outside my room. I scrambled for my phone with the intention of calling the cops. But just as my thumb hovered over the dial icon, the breathing receded down the hall, replaced by the sound of retreating footsteps. I hunkered down in the room the entire night, unable to sleep. Every innocuous nighttime noise had me on high alert. I clutched my phone like a lifeline, prepared to summon help at the first sign of an intruder. But morning light eventually crept in, and nothing happened. When I went downstairs to check out early, Martin was in the kitchen humming cheerfully. "Leaving so soon?" he asked with a disappointed pout. I made up an excuse about work needing me back urgently. He reluctantly agreed to refund me for the unused nights. As I hauled my suitcase out the front door, the hairs on my neck prickled. I risked a glance back and glimpsed Martin's tall shadow creeping around a corner, watching me leave. I jumped into my car and peeled out of there like my life depended on it. So yeah, for weeks after, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, plagued by lingering unease. I'll never know what Martin's intentions were, or what might have happened if I'd stayed there alone for multiple nights. Frankly, I don't want to know. Since then, I always thoroughly vet places and hosts before booking. Cheap lodging isn't worth risking my safety and peace of mind.